The death of GOATs is here for good, and you can finally say goodbye to 5 DPS players in your Overwatch games, because after months of rumors, Blizzard has finally announced the addition of role queue to Overwatch, and it comes with a role lock to the Overwatch League. Pulsable and Lafon here. If you're an active participant in the Overwatch community, you've probably heard the term role queue thrown around at least once or twice within the last year or so. It's been a recommendation by a large portion of the community of both casual and professional players so that some sort of order could be brought to the competitive scene. On July 18th at roughly 11 a.m. Pacific time, the official Overwatch Twitter announced that role queue would be coming to the game and even added it immediately to the public test region.
The way it's going to work is rather straightforward. In Overwatch, you have 3 main roles: tanks, damage dealers, and supports. Now, whenever you queue for a match of Overwatch, either quick play or competitive, you'll be asked to select which of these you would like to play ahead of time, and then match with players that complete the other roles, such that both teams of 6 players have 2 tanks, 2 damage dealers, and 2 supports each.
For the competitive mode, where you are ranked and gain or lose SR based on your skill level, you will now have 3 separate ranks, one for each role. For example, although you may be a diamond level damage dealer player, you may only fall into a silver level when you queue up as a tank. For players who like to play every role though, or for those who don't know which is their best, don't worry. You'll only have to play 5 placement matches instead of the previous 10 to be placed and given an SR number for that particular role.
As mentioned earlier, this role queue is available for testing on the PTR right now, along with a number of other changes to heroes in the balance area to go with it. So go give it a whirl if you're curious and figure out how it feels.
Pairing with this announcement is a much expected announcement from the professional scene stating that the Overwatch League will be matching suit and adding in a role lock for its matches. This means that each team, while playing a match, will be comprised of 2 of each of the roles, again, tanks, damage dealers, and supports, and during the maps, players cannot play heroes outside of their selected role. Players can change their role between maps, meaning that quote-unquote flex players who cover more than one role will still be able to do so, but they'll only be able to select a single role for a single map.
This change comes as soon as next week, when Stage 4 of this season begins on the 26th of July. And it will be present for all of this stage, as well as the overall season playoffs. When asked why this change was coming now, about 3/4 of the way through the 2019 season, the Overwatch League said that it was to keep the professional game as close to the live version as possible, and that the majority of teams were on board with the timing.
Now, Lafon, we had a video kind of covering role lock and what it might mean for the Overwatch League a couple weeks ago, and one of the things I did mention is that I like the game to be as close as possible, but this does bring up a lot of questions about something called competitive integrity.
And honestly, this is a point I harked on a ton because I genuinely believe that for the Overwatch League to be a sustainable and competitive esport into the future, competitive integrity has to be at the heart of every decision. Personally, I feel like changing how the entire game is played 3/4 of the way through the season really falls foul of that.
It certainly means that some teams who have been thriving on the meta that didn't revolve around 2-2-2 are gonna have to now scramble a little bit. It kind of is a clean slate 3/4 of the way through the season, right? Everybody's gonna play 2-2-2. Who knows who's gonna be good at it? Good luck.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be, really interesting because it brings up another question, which we're going to have to do with a bit, is that, how much of the term adaptability plays into it, right? How much of that is really a thing to be concerned about or to predict for if you're a general manager. And I think that's going to be a big deal here in this next stage. And I personally would rather see a single style of play throughout the entire season rather than changing halfway through.
I mean, there's the argument to be made that the best overall rosters will be ones that can adapt and play in every single meta, but often when we have these kind of like jack of all trades kinds of teams, they're really high in the standings, and then when we get to playoffs, they don't do so well because they're kind of good at every meta, but not the best at whatever we end up in. That's kind of what happened last year when Philly and the London Spitfire sort of just ran rampant through the playoffs, but were lacking in stages 3 and 4.
Yeah, and it's certainly a thing to keep in mind as we head into future Overwatch Leagues seasons, right? So it's definitely a question that needs to be answered, and I don't think that the question really has been addressed properly here in this season.
Well, now that you bring up future seasons, though, I do think in the long run, this is a good thing for the league and certainly Overwatch in general, right? I mean, if we're talking about just the game, nobody likes to be the one support queued up into a match with 5 DPS players, whether you're playing quick play or competitive. But even in the competitive scene, it's going to be good to have that consistency for the long run, and it's going to really create a solid foundation for how we see Overwatch League progress.
But the future is in the future, so we have to deal with right now, and right now we've got the very real 2-2-2 lock coming in Stage 4, and at least initially doesn't look like there's a balance patch coming with it, Paul. So, heading into Stage 4, there's some real meta predictions we can do right now.
Yeah, talking about the patch, we did bring up earlier that alongside roll queue on the PTR right now, there is a balance patch as well. It changes a lot of different things that I honestly, looking at the list, think it's wholesale good changes across the board outside of a weird Moira change. But Ultimate Generation is up 12% across the board. I think that's a wholly good change. Brigitte has now been fully reworked to be a support player, and characters like Orisa and Hanzo, who a lot of people were concerned would dominate the upcoming meta, have seen minor nerfs. So I am excited for when we do finally get to that patch.
But, and this is key, it at least initially looks like the Overwatch League will not get these patch changes in Stage 4. It is looking a lot more like what will happen this season playoffs. So that is something to keep in mind here as heading into Stage 4, a lot of people are thinking Dive might come back, but frankly, I think there's another composition we have to look at a little bit more closely, and that is Clockwork Vendetta.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if you guys liked seeing Winstons or Tracers, I hope you also like seeing Torbjorns and Orisas, because if you've been paying attention to EU contenders, Clockwork Vendetta is kind of running rampant right now, and it's a bunch of characters that are going to be much better when it's locked into a 2-2-2 scenario, right? And so, if you're looking forward to Dive, sorry, probably not gonna come back for Stage 4 at the very least, maybe for the overall season playoffs, but I think it's safe to say we'll probably get some Clockwork Vendetta comp and some Bunker, maybe double Sniper in Stage 4.
Yeah, there's not really going to be a whole lot of Dive as you highlighted, and I honestly don't expect it to return in full force anytime soon. Whether the PTR change will be enough for it remains to be seen, but at least as of Stage 4, that is unlikely. But, we have been speaking of contenders a little bit, and I think just to tad onto that a little bit more, contenders teams are going to be playing on 2-2-2 a lot sooner than expected, and, they didn't even get the benefit of being told by the league.
Now, for those of you who might not be aware, matching the announcement of Roll Lock and Roll Q was another one from the official Contenders Twitter stating that for Playoffs Season 2, which is in just a couple of weeks, all Contenders regions will be playing on a Roll Lock in general. And none of the teams were told officially that that would be happening until they saw that tweet.
Yeah, that I think is particularly problematic because, not being able to prepare for EU contenders, it's 13 days until playoffs. So not even 2 weeks. And that's a ridiculously low amount of time to actually prepare for such a large shift. So I, for one, not too pleased about that particular situation. But, you'll have to see how these teams kind of perform and into their playoff situations before Gauntlet. And of course, Overwatch World Cup, which will also be played on the 2-2-2 roll lock scenario.
Yeah, kind of unfortunate for those Path to Pro guys, but on the bright side, right, a lot of those players, a lot of the DPS players especially, have been struggling a little bit to show off their stuff. It's hard to show how good of a flex DPS player you are when you can't flex and all you do is play Brigitte. So short-term loss, long-term gain. I'm excited to see how it turns out. And hopefully a year from now, we'll be talking about this as one of the best changes Blizzard has made to one of their games. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, there's a button for that down below, alongside a bunch of cool stuff you should check out in the description. If you didn't like the video, leave us a comment. Tell us why. We're always looking to improve. But either way, make sure you subscribe to Elo Hell Esports for more Overwatch content.